Hello, everyone. Hello. Hello. Is that better? Sounds like it.
Yes, that's much better.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure. Okay, great. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there.
Were you using the chat
Anyways.
like the talk button, I mean?
Yeah, I'm using the talk button. Yep. Yeah. All right. Well, my class is... Sorry, what?
Oh, I thought maybe it was something to do with the talk button interacting with the conference line.
No, I think it's okay. I think it was something weird on my end. I don't know why it was echoing so bad. Sometimes it's just a little bit strange. But anyways, my clock here says 6 o'clock, so we can go ahead and get started as some other folks continue to trickle in here. My name is Natalie Abel, and I'm with iNACOL, and I will be helping to moderate and facilitate tonight's webinar. So before I turn it over to our wonderful panel of presenters this evening, I have just a few really quick housekeeping items to run through with you. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to please introduce yourself in the chat box. We'd love to get to know you a little bit. We'd love to know who you are, where you're tuning in from, what school or district you're working with, and what you're hoping to get out of tonight's webinar. And we also encourage you to really share a lot of your own experiences and expertise through the chat box as well, so that this is really a two-way dialogue tonight. And we encourage a lot of questions too, so we'll certainly take your questions throughout the webinar and at the end during Q&A, so please feel free to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll be sure to pose those to the presenters for you. And if you'd like to share what you're learning on Twitter too, feel free to connect with us there. We can drop our Twitter handles into the chat box for you. We'd love to connect and merge our professional learning communities and grow those as well. And tonight's webinar will be recorded and archived on the inacol.org website, so we'll follow up with you all in a couple days, and we'll share a link with you where you'll be able to access this full recording, and you'll be able to download the slides as well, so you'll be able to revisit any of these conversations, and they're free and open for anybody to watch or view, so you'll be able to share those with any colleagues who might be interested and peers. So with that, I will gladly turn it over to our friends from Cleveland at the Lincoln West School of Global Studies, where we're going to hear some strategies that teachers are using to develop global citizenship skills and dispositions in students and really learn ways that they are cultivating these dispositions in students and some strategies and projects they're implementing. So with that, Brian, I'd be happy to now turn it over to you to kick us off today.
Great, thank you, Natalie, and thank you everyone for joining us. If at any point it's hard to hear me, please put something in the chat box, and I'll make sure I'm a little bit closer, a little bit further away from the mic. But as Natalie said, we're at Lincoln West School of Global Studies in Cleveland, Ohio, and we are part of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, which is the public school system for the city of Cleveland. Over the last, over the last 5 years or so, the city of Cleveland has kind of been taking a look at its high schools and transforming and redesigning many of them. So the school that we're at I figured I'd just give a little short background of our school. It'll make a little bit more sense than when our other educators kind of get on and talk about some of the projects and some of the logistics of what we're doing here. You would have a better understanding of the environment in which we're doing it. So about 2 years ago, or exactly 2 years ago, our school opened up at the Lincoln West campus, which was traditionally a comprehensive high school. So we have 2 small schools here, and that's kind of the model that Cleveland's been going with, smaller, more focused academies. So right now we currently only have 9th and 10th grade, and we have a focus on global studies. And what I did is I included a few slides from our principal's kind of school model presentation, and that'll kind of help guide and kind of, again, give context for the school environment. So the reason why global studies is so important is we are located in an area of Cleveland that has a very diverse population. We have a very high concentration of refugees in this area, so our global studies kind of comes in part from our school student body, but also our staff. We have a number of staff members that were born in other countries. Many of them speak multiple languages. So we give our students a great exposure to many different cultures and ethnicities, and we really celebrate those in our learning and a lot of our performance tasks. The other thing about global is we get our students out of the classroom a lot, and that's built into our school model. We recognize the soft skills that people competing in a global economy and a global marketplace need, and we make sure we do our best to instill those in our students. So as freshmen, our 9th graders, we try to get out and explore the city of Cleveland as much as we can. Cleveland as an international city. As they kind of transform into sophomores, we expand our region and we try to get out regionally a little bit more. And then by the time they're juniors and seniors, our goal is for international travel, and we already actually have a trip planned for Puerto Rico, and we were able to work with our congresswoman to get a couple kids to China actually last year as freshmen. So we're already kind of meeting that goal, which is really exciting because, again, we're only in year 2. What we do, we kind of transform, so we're a year-round school. Our students go for 10 weeks on, then they get 3 weeks off, so a very short summer break. Our staff has 2 weeks off, and then we have professional development built in during that 3rd week. So we are constantly reflecting and kind of working on things that didn't quite go right, and also expanding on things that really went well. This is a very kind of rudimentary kind of explanation of what we do, and this will make more sense when we kind of talk about our anchor performance tax and experiential learning. But really, we broke things down. We are competency-based, and we are mastery. So we took, I think it's on the next slide. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. So we went ahead and broke down national learning standards into competencies for each of the main core content areas, but also competencies, school-wide competencies that kind of focus on those soft skills we're talking about. And then we put them into rubrics. So everything is rubric-based. And so going back to this slide here. So our students are asked to sorry, there's an issue with the audio though real quick. So in a blended learning environment, all of our students have one-on-one technology. Our students learn the content, focusing on the competencies, and they do that through experiential learning and service learning. And again, we have many examples of what that looks like as we go through this webinar. So these are just a brief example of some of the anchor performance tasks. This is one of the examples of the, like I said, all of our students one-on-one technology. So we supply laptops for all of our students. And this is what I already kind of highlighted on year 1. We really start to explore the city of Cleveland. That is through many of our partnerships. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Year 2, we start to expand. Year 3, and finally year 4, our students are expected to perform a capstone, which is not unique for many of the schools. So at this point, I'll talk a little bit more about my position and the college and career readiness aspects. that we fold into all of our content. But at this time, I think it's best to turn it over to Michael Gong, and he'll kind of talk a little bit about some of those anchor performance tasks and service learning we referenced.
Hi, everybody. So, like Mr. Brochetti said, my name is Michael Gong. I'm one of the science teachers here at Global Studies. I would like to talk about a couple of the different anchor performance tasks that I use and how we can connect those to service learning. Like Mr. Brochetti touched on, service learning here is a big way that we engage our students and really get them to think about the issues in our community here in Cleveland, and then across the country, and of course around the globe. So really my goal is to integrate service learning into our curriculum at least once per quarter, but you know, after the first 2 years of, or year and a half really, of our school using this model, I've been trying to implement it more often because of how much our students really enjoy that opportunity to work in the community, but also then their reflections afterwards that really show their learning. So one of the partners that I work with specifically is Thomas Jefferson Newcomers Academy. Thomas Jefferson Newcomers Academy is a K-12 school in Cleveland where students new to the country attend until they're deemed to be ready to enter one of the other Cleveland Metropolitan schools. So these are all obviously English language learners. Thomas Jefferson is great with all the wraparound services and really help with the family's transition to a new city, new community, and so not only educating the student, but also there for the family's needs as well. So we're partnered with a 6th grade science classroom, again, like I said, of all English language learners, and many of our current students actually formerly went to Thomas Jefferson and have experience of what it's like to be a new student in the country and learning at that particular school. So if in the picture here you see one of our students in the red t-shirt there showing one of his anchor performance tasks actually to the group of students there and kind of explaining about one of our projects as we taught a short lesson there. So he had been a student at TJ, came to Global Studies, and now has that opportunity to go give back to the school that helped him kind of adjust to this new home. So our goal then with this specific service learning activity is to engage the younger students, so the 6th grade students, in science concepts through hands-on activities with the support of our high schoolers. So we spoke with the 6th grade teacher, science teacher at Thomas Jefferson, to kind of get a feel of what were his students' needs and what barriers were they facing, especially in the science classroom. So he identified a couple different ways in which our students would be able to help. So he has about 8 to 10 different languages being spoken in his classroom at any given time, and he teaches 100% in English. So you could see how that might be difficult for a new student to the country, not knowing much English and having to learn about metamorphic rocks and energy and simple chemical equations, things like that. Science is a language of its own. So the language barrier is obviously a huge obstacle for students. And then also he said he wanted really his students to understand the process of the scientific method. What makes a good scientific question? What kind of data do you need to collect? Things like that. So our students then are able to go into the classroom, teach them mini lessons essentially on what we are learning in science and how that integrates into their current curriculum as well. And then the beautiful thing is we'll have, you know, students from Lincoln West Global Studies who are speaking 5, 6, 7 different languages who can actually group up and pair with the students there and really help them out in that way. So going back to how this goes to the topic, which is, you know, developing students as global citizens, our students really feel like they are making a difference in their community. And not only in their Cleveland community, but they're helping students who have come from all around the world, Nepal, the Congo, Puerto Rico, other places, Central and South America, Asia, Middle East especially. So they're able to work with these students here in their new home and really make them feel welcome in their city. And they can tell them, like, I was once, a student in your shoes, and they understand what it's like to go through that. So that experience of having to move to a totally different place. So our students really enjoy that opportunity to feel like they're making an impact and helping somebody else out. So not only are they able to reflect on that experience, but then it also gets them more engaged in what we are doing in science. So we do 2 different anchored performance tasks, mainly in science, and one is a lab report. We make them write a lot of lab reports, and then also science modeling. So just being able to use the service learning component as a way to enhance their anchored performance tasks has been really effective for me, and it's something that I would encourage no matter what subject you teach, is finding a way to get students out into the community to engage with other whether that's schools, community centers, other nonprofits, ways that they feel like they can give back in ways that connect to their learning. That has been huge for my class and the students here at Global Studies. I'm now going to hand it off to Lisa Cahoon, who is going to talk about personal coaching and our exhibitions of learning.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Lisa Cahoon, or as my slides say, Vine. I got married. So I'm going to talk to you guys about one of the school-wide events that take place twice a year called our exhibitions of learning. So this is a way that we assess our students' knowledge of content from their APTs and their courses, so the projects they do, and also how they are demonstrating the skills and the competencies that they are doing within those APTs, which are really, really great because it's preparing them for the real-world application of presenting to people and preparing for presentations, all of those things that are like the skills that we're hoping they get, and this is an opportunity for us to see how they're actually doing with those things. So I have quite a lot of slides about this, so get ready. So here are just a few things that we are looking at when we are assessing our students during their presentations, their exhibitions of learning. So one of the things that they will cover is demonstrating their understanding of the content that they learned during their anchor performance tasks. So the students will be choosing an APT from one of their courses that they were really proud of, and they have to actually be able to explain what they learned from that. This gives the students an opportunity to work on their public speaking skills. We work with them to prepare for it and how to organize when they're getting ready to present to a group, practicing professionalism, what does it look like to dress for success, or how should you be speaking when you're in a group of people that you may or may not know. And the other part is receiving feedback on their presentations and also being able to give that feedback to their peers. So all of our students are participating in their exhibitions of learning. Right now we only have 9th and 10th grade students that participate. They do it twice a year, so they do it once in February after the first semester and then once in June at the end of the second semester. And they will continue to do these twice a year until they get to their senior year, where they will pretty much independently come up with a service learning project that they want to focus on and present their case to a group. So the presentations are given in a roundtable format, which I'll explain a little bit more later. So it's going to be a small group a lot of our kids are worried that they're going to present to everyone at the school, which is not the case. And we begin preparing for the EOLs a couple months in advance through our advisory curriculum, which is similar to a homeroom, but we actually have a curriculum for it where students have like a family and we can support them in those like soft skills. And then we assess these students with our school-wide competencies, and we'll take a look at some of those in a rubric in a little bit. So, as I said, we are only in our second year, so we are still figuring out logistically how the EOL is going to look from year to year. So at the moment, our freshmen are choosing one anchor performance task from a core class that they are really proud of and kind of want to showcase in front of their peers and teachers. And then we are having our sophomores choose two different APTs, and in that selection, they're really focusing on one that they are proud of and that maybe came easily to them, and the second one, they are choosing that it might have been really challenging, and they're reflecting on their growth as learners. So as I said, the preparation for the EOLs is taking place during our advisory period. We have that at the beginning of the day, and we try our best to keep our kids with the same advisory teacher through their time here at Global Studies. During this time, the students are able to access resources that help them prepare for their EOL, such as creating a cover page for their folder, practice answering questions that people might ask. What does the rubric look like? How am I being assessed when I give my presentation? What are the possible performance tasks I can choose to present? And then they have a teacher there that is there to support them, like, should I be writing out note cards with my talking points on it, like I should probably have right now? So like those things that they wouldn't necessarily think to do, because a lot of our students have no experience with public speaking, even in a small group setting. So as I said, the students are assessed with our school-wide competencies, and actually both the freshmen and 10th graders, they'll be assessed with the exact same rubric. So we're really looking to see their growth through the EOL from their first time freshman year to the second time when they're doing it in their sophomore year. So we're really excited because this is our first year with 10th graders, so it's going to be really neat to see how much growth our students have had even just through 1 year. I mean, we saw last year just from their EOL in February to June, like huge growth. Like the students were much more confident and much more prepared. So it's a really neat process to be a part of. So here's an example of just a few of the school-wide competencies that we are assessing during this time. So the actual preparation for the exhibition of learning, which includes like, are you dressed professionally? Are you on time for this? Are you prepared for your presentation? We go into, is it an engaging presentation? Did you have a great flow to it? Were you able to explain the project? So our rubric is from a 0 to 3, and this is how the rubrics are for our anchor performance task. Anything that is using a competency, this is the layout for it, so it is familiar to the students. But these are some of the skills that they may not always be able to demonstrate in their courses, which is why the EOL is a great assessment process for us. So as I mentioned, exhibitions of learning are in a roundtable format. So the roundtable will consist of a teacher who is the facilitator of the group. They're the one that is making sure the logistics are going okay. Are we on time? Is everyone here? Who is going when? Then we have our community partners actually come in and participate, which is really great because the students aren't just presenting to their peers or their teacher, but there's actually someone from the community that is coming to see what amazing work they're doing and how much they're learning and growing. And then this year we will be having freshmen and sophomores in the round tables together. Last year we only had freshmen, so it'll be very interesting to see how the freshmen and sophomores presentation goes together in a round table. So logistically, the students get 5 minutes to do their presentation, and then once they have concluded their presentation, we allow 5 minutes for questions and answers. And while this is all happening, everyone in the round table, so the teacher, the community partner, and the student's peers are assessing the student based on that rubric that I showed earlier. After that happens, the student leaves the room for about 5 minutes while everyone else discusses some of the strengths and weaknesses of the presentation. And the students who are assessing will then invite the student back into the room and actually give them that constructive feedback, which they can then use in preparation for their next EOL. And then one of the cool parts after the whole exhibition of learning, we have like a luncheon for the students, the community partners, and the teachers, which just gives us an opportunity to, you know, talk about how things are going, networking. Oh, I heard you presented on this. Is that something that you're interested for your future? And it's just a really great way for our students to engage in the community in more of like a professional setting. So that's all I have about our EOLs. And then I'm going to turn it over back to Brian Brochetti, our College and Career Success Manager.
Thank you very much. I am going to talk a little bit before we end with Ms. Dina Hoyk and some of her art service learning and some of her anchor performance tasks in her art class. We are going to just talk briefly about what college career readiness looks like at our school, kind of our map and vision, and logistically how it's kind of planned into these anchor performance tasks and service learning. So I have a rather unique position at the school. My title, as Ms. Cahoon said, or Ms. Vine, is College and Career Success Manager. And prior to starting at the school, I had never heard of a title like that. There are relatively few of us in the district, so that's kind of nice because I get to kind of craft what the position looks like. And at the current moment, being the small school that we are, and only having 2 grades, I'm performing some of the tasks that would traditionally be done by a guidance counselor. So scheduling, working with College Board because we did fold in some AP courses this year, coordinated testing for PSAT, and hopefully some ACT tests for some of our top performing students this year as sophomores. But the other things that I do is much more exciting and what I really enjoy about my position. So I know Ms. Vine talked a little bit about working with many community partners, and part of my job is to kind of build some of those community partnerships. One of our strongest is with the Cleveland Council of World Affairs. They are an organization that makes sure that we're living true to kind of the global studies education that we pride ourselves on. They run a really kind of robust Model UN program here in the Cleveland area, and we make sure that we are participating in that competition. We also, my position also sits on the Friends of Global Studies and helps kind of coordinate the agenda and recruiting partners for the Friends of Global Studies. And whenever we have a community partner in the school, we work very hard to capture them, make sure we have their contact, and that's what we use to build upon our list for EOLs. So that is one exciting kind of aspect of my position. It allows me to get out of the school building. It allows me to kind of make those important connections. The other thing that we did is kind of a practical matter, is we asked all of our teachers and staff to kind of share professional contacts that they have, you know, in whatever walks of life. You know, most of us know attorneys, doctors, medical staff, and those are people that we have captured their contact, 1 or 2 from each of our staff members, that we now bring back in for career panels, that we can bring in for these exhibitions of learning. And I invite everyone to kind of have that list of professional network from their teachers and staff members that they can kind of keep and leverage when they need. So besides working with community partners, the other aspect of my job deals a little bit more with curriculum and making sure that we embed this college and career readiness into our curriculum. So we have asked our staff to backwards plan both with their content, but really as it relates to college and career readiness too. We looked at what an average college freshman is expected to do in terms of reading, in terms of writing, and we backwards plan that. So each year we're making sure we get closer and closer to that mark so our students are on track. But making sure that the tasks we ask them to do are aligned with that it's getting them ready for that first year of college. So all of the teachers share their 10-week plans and their weekly kind of lesson plans with the administration, and I have the ability to kind of review those and make sure that we're living true to that. And I have a standing invite to all their content collaboration meetings, which is great because I'm making sure that, again, that college and career readiness is always on the mind when we're teaching our content. And in fact, the 10-week plans and the weekly plans have a box asking teachers to ask or indicate how this lesson, how this anchor performance test relates to college and career readiness, which is a unique kind of task, but it makes sure that we don't forget about that. The other good thing about having a position like mine that has that standing invite to all the content collaboration meetings is I'm able to kind of help plan some of these anchor performance tasks and service learning projects that get us out of the classroom and kind of help plan some of the cross-curricular activities. So I'm going to briefly highlight like one or two of them, and then like I said, Ms. Hoyne can kind of highlight some of the art ones. But the one I mentioned career panels, and we have a great organization in Cleveland called Cleveland Leads, but you could do this without having their pool of professionals at hand. And basically as freshmen, we have them come in, it's a group of about 6 professionals, and we don't indicate to the students what they do for a living, and we have them play a game of 20 questions, where the students would ask these professionals questions about what they do, and ultimately they have to try to guess what these individuals do. And by bringing in professionals from all kinds of walk of life and kind of playing this game, students get to learn a lot about these individual specific careers, but many of them made career changes or went to school for one specific major and then ended up going a different route. And I think it's important that we expose our students to that kind of flexibility professionally. So our students are getting a good experience by playing this 20-question game with professionals, and we do that twice a year for freshmen. Last year, at the end of the year, we have a local organization in Cleveland called Mustard Seed, and they work, specifically what they do is they find homes in the Cleveland area that are neglected, that are basically owned by the land bank, and they either get these from the land bank for free or for very low cost, and they rehab them specifically to rent out or sell at low cost to some of these refugee families that we work so closely with. And what we did with this Mustard Seed project is they came into our math class, and the president of the company came in and talked a little bit about business plans, and our algebra students worked on kind of creating a floor plan for some of these structures, a cost analysis of supplies needed to kind of fix up some of these homes. So we have the math content, we have this president coming in talking about the hazards and the joys of owning his own business, of being the president of this organization, and then we actually got the students out into these homes, and they actually did a little of the labor themselves. They got to knock down some of the bricks in the basement and rip up some carpet, and it was nice to get them into the community because when we're talking about creating global citizens, certainly that starts at home and being a citizen in your own community. So that was a really cool project that we did. And then lastly, I want to highlight something we did with our sophomores to start the year. We planned a trip up to Michigan. We had the students participate in the Global Village through Heifer International, so the students got to look a little bit about food scarcity, what it means to have access to good water, good food, and we related that to the Flint water crisis that happened in the Michigan area not that long ago. And on day 2, after they were done with the Global Village, we visited 2 college campuses, Michigan State and Eastern Michigan. And the idea was, how did these local colleges, how do these secondary institutions deal with this crisis? How do they help out their community? How could their students get involved? We wanted our students to see that being a good citizen doesn't stop when you leave high school, that it can continue and it could be a reason why you actually go to school after high school. So then we could bring that back to the Cleveland area, and as sophomores they're taking biology, and we've had our own issues with Lake Erie as of late, with algae blooms a little bit closer to the Toledo area. But that's a running theme now that we can continue through this year, this access to clean water and food. And so that's kind of an example of that cross-curricular, but also still exposure to different colleges and different careers. With that, again, if you have any questions as it relates to anything that we just talked about, of course, throw it into the chat box as we go. But at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Dina Hoink, and she can kind of talk a little bit more about what she does in the art classroom.
Hi, thanks, Brian. So I'm Dina Hoink. I'm our art teacher. I'm going to be sharing some examples with you today of projects that I've done that open up the walls of the classroom and bring students real-world art-making experiences. I'm assuming most of us have taken at least one high school art class, so we all have a pretty good idea of what a typical art curriculum looks like. And my classroom does operate like that typical art room in many ways. Students have concrete learning objectives, lessons are aligned with those goals, I model techniques, they work on projects, and so on. Where this traditional model falls short, however, is in authentically teaching the real skills practicing artists use, particularly those artists working in more contemporary media, such as installation art, for instance. And I think that's where competency-based education really offers new strategies in teaching art. Thank you for advancing that. Sorry, I just not thrilled with the title because I didn't really actually talk about social practice, so I was a little nervous about keeping that up for the next 3 minutes while I introduce, but we're cool. So where was I? So it offers, competency-based education offers new strategies in teaching art, because I can use it to guide my students toward developing those planning, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills that are not only essential to an art practice, but also highly transferable to other disciplines. Prior to working at the School of Global Studies, I taught as an artist educator with Progressive Arts Alliance, which is a local nonprofit that uses arts integration residencies to support STEM education within the CMSD district. Before going into the classroom on a residency, I would collaborate with our program coordinator and with the classroom teacher to produce an innovative project, usually with an eye toward public display, either in the school or at the district STEAM festival. In my current role, I draw a lot on that kind of ambitious project planning that I did in that position, which was very much grounded in a sort of concept-first, form-follows-function approach to art making. That role brought me back to my undergrad experience as an art student in a way I'd kind of forgotten about since becoming a teacher. Because artists today don't necessarily say, I need to make a watercolor painting. They might say, I'm doing a public sculpture that needs to support the weight of 8 kids. So what material makes the most sense to use? How do I learn to use that material? Who can I ask? Who I might know? Who can help me learn? And those are the really critical skills that I'm trying to cultivate in my students, albeit with a very gradual release. So I want to share with you today a couple of big projects that I've done with my students recently that kind of break that mold of the traditional art room, and I think connect students with a more authentic experience of how contemporary artists work. I'll be talking about 2 projects in particular, although you're going to see images from 3 projects interspersed, both of which were supported by community partnerships and created for display in public art events. We are so lucky in Cleveland to have this really robust art scene, and I've been fortunate enough to start developing a pretty strong network of connections within that community over the past few years, which I think has been critical to bringing these experiences to my students. The first project was titled City Blocks and displayed at an annual event we have here called Rooms to Let. The event is tailor-made for our enhanced service learning approach, in which students apply their burgeoning skills in solving a real-world problem. In this case, the goal of the project is to use art to help revitalize the Slavic Village neighborhood of Cleveland. So this nonprofit community organization, the Slavic Village Development Corporation, identifies 3 to 4 distressed properties every year that are in need of demolition. Then enlists teams of artists to transform those properties using site-specific art installations. The art-filled homes are then opened to the public for 1 weekend in May, with the goal of drawing positive attention to the neighborhood and encouraging young professionals to purchase newly renovated homes in the community. Let me get over here. So just what you're looking at here is my sketch for our installation at Rooms to Let, and I'll let you glance at that while I talk. So when designing this project, I identified 6 criteria it needed to fulfill. Interactivity, how would it engage the viewer? Scale, how would it fill the space? Feasibility, were the materials and techniques easy to learn, safe, and affordable? Gradability, was the project modular in nature, such that every student produced an individual, accessible artifact that then came together to be a part of the finished work? Originality, did the project have something worth saying? Did it say it in an interesting and novel way? And aesthetic merit, would the finished piece be beautiful or at least interesting to look at? Was there cohesion between the structure of the project and its message? In conversations with my students, one of them suggested, ironically, that we build a wall. This was a politically loaded statement. But this launched a conversation about what it means to build walls, both literal and metaphorical, and what other structures we might build within our community. Coming back to that feasibility criterion, knowing we couldn't afford or haul actual bricks, I opted to use cardboard blocks, like the ones you might see in an early childhood classroom. And I was even lucky enough to solicit a donation for this raw material. I was really satisfied with how this project design met all the criteria I'd outlined for myself. So here are some students assembling the blocks. I've got quite a few photos of the assembly process and the construction process, so we're going to zip through those for a minute here. They are priming the blocks with latex house paint, and then there's a lot of them. We had about 200 blocks. I calculated that that's what we would need to fill the space in an appropriate volume. This is a visiting artist, John Carlson. So one of the community partners that I've worked with is the Cleveland Print Room, and they've provided John for 2 semesters running now. He's really fantastic, very successful local painter who also uses, he also comes into the classroom. Here he's teaching trace monoprinting. So basically we put paint on the back of a photograph and then drew over the top to create an image like that. That's Ustra. So we had 3 different types of printmaking in this project. Here's stenciling, there was a trace monoprint, and then there's also acrylic gel transfers, which are photographic process. This was the sign created for viewers to the event to understand that it is an interactive piece. And then we did a field trip to install the work. A learning expedition is more accurate, to install the work. So all the colorful graffiti on the walls was put in by students, and then the boxes sat within the room, inviting interaction. That's my daughter. So these are some viewers to the event on the weekend of Rooms to Let. And it was really powerful for me, I think, to see people looking at these things. The project was very personal to the students. One thing I always find thrilling about being an art teacher is the potential for students to surprise me with their work. So even with this project, which had pretty constrained parameters, all the blocks were black, white, and gold. They used the stencils, they used the gel transfers, the trace monoprints. But there was such a range of approaches in the content, from totally sincere to confessional to comic. And every student was responsible for producing 3 to 4 blocks. Each block represented a different facet of that child's life. So I gave them a list of potential prompts, like their dreams, their fears, their families. There was about 30 other autobiographic details for them to choose from for each block. But then they really made it their own. And visitors to the event told me again and again how moved they were by the personal nature of the piece and how impressed by the seriousness with which students approached the work. It was also really interesting for me being there the weekend of the event and observing how different people interacted with the piece differently. So just a few more of these to show you. And then the other project I wanted to discuss happened this September at Ingenuity Fest, which is a 3-day art and music festival. And it was a little different because I wanted the whole project to be student-generated from the very start. This obviously posed some challenges. I was concerned about sourcing materials on a shortened schedule rather than ordering them before term started. But I figured I could take that into consideration and steer students away from anything requiring materials not readily available locally. To be candid, though, my bigger fear was in relinquishing so much control to my students. And I was worried that they might not have enough foundational knowledge to propose interesting projects, especially as this was our first lesson cycle of the year, and I hadn't even met most of the students I would be teaching. So I knew I needed to provide them with some structure and context to make informed creative decisions. I began by introducing students to examples of installation art by famous artists, as well as showing them our school's prior projects. And then I walked them through a critical inquiry process to help them unpack the meaning of the pieces we viewed. More importantly, I turned the criteria I had established for myself, those 6 criteria, while developing the room select concept, into a student-facing evaluation form. After students collaborated in small groups to develop their own project proposals, each class picked the best proposal to bring to the other classes for a vote. Then, students used the evaluation form to rate these final 4 projects. I gathered these forms like voting ballots to determine which project we would proceed with. And frankly, the one we went with was probably not the one I would have personally picked. There was actually a giant rainbow-hued puzzle that I thought was really cool sounding, but that's not what we did. But our final project was really, really good, and I'm glad it got picked. It's not an idea I would have come up with on my own, and putting that agency back into the hands of the students was it felt like a big risk at the start, but it worked out really well. So ultimately, we did this project that had an interactive basketball theme, which I then further refined into a lesson on pattern and line that used basketball as a metaphor for goal setting. Each student produced a ball that expressed his or her dreams or hopes for the future. And we created backboards emblazoned with words representing different assets one might need to achieve those goals, such as family or dedication. Even the title, One Team, Many Dreams, was student-generated and selected democratically by a Power School poll with a dozen other student-suggested titles. Installing the work on site definitely did require some after-hours effort on my part, as did attending the work for the duration of the festival, but it was worth it to see our collaboration being enjoyed by hundreds of participants. This is what you're looking at here is an honors project. So my honors students had a different project of Ingenuity Fest with my 10th grade students who took art with me last year and are tracking up toward AP. I'm going to look for a second at some of these images. These are the backboards that Daviana working on, outlining the text. And then this is the learning expedition that my honor students took to the Ingenuity Fest site in advance of the event to assemble and install their work. So their pieces were the illustration that you saw Malati working on earlier. Each of them produced their own colored pencil illustration, which I scanned at high resolution and printed large format using my connections with Case Western, which is my alma mater. I used their tech lab for that. We're taking a little break. That's the finished honors piece. I just wanted you to see that, and you're going to see some installation shots of that in a minute being interacted with by visitors to the event. These are the backboards. So one challenge that I still struggle with on these community-based projects is getting students to attend the events that occur outside of the school day. The students who did attend Ingenuity Fest were blown away by how cool it was, and they reported a huge sense of pride at their involvement in the event. Every student who visited Ingenuity seemed to have a different favorite part. Felix loved the butterfly tent, Najee liked the welding, Jocelyn was kind of so-so on the whole thing, but her mom was like, well, there's live music, that's awesome. But I'm going forward, I have some ideas about how to get more kids out to these events. One thing I've talked to Zach Germanick, who's the Slavic Village Development Corporation fellow who we've worked with, is like maybe having a special weekday opening just for our students after the event, but before all the art has been uninstalled. But it is definitely like a goal for me going forward to increase student attendance for after-hours events, because as you can see, this is a really cool event, and everyone who went to it, my honors group, said, wow, that was a really cool event. It's just hard to get the kids to come out to them right now. That's something I'm working on. But going back to what we're talking about here, I think what growth for me as an educator in general and an art educator in particular looks like is always striving toward giving more autonomy to my students and equipping them with as much agency as possible, but providing the requisite structure and tools for them to be successful in those endeavors. I want them to make real art for a real audience and see the impact that their labor has on the world. I'd love to open this up for any questions you might have at this time. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Wow, that was excellent. I am simply blown away by the creativity, and something you expressed, Dina, that we hear from teachers over and over again is how scary it can be to let go of control and to really give voice and choice to students, and not knowing what's going to come out of it. But so frequently, kids just amaze you, and it's incredible what they can come up with. So thank you for sharing. These pictures are fantastic. And I've really enjoyed listening to all of you so far this evening. So to those of you in the chat box now, if you have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to type them in. And I'd like to start off with a question for all of you. So you all are doing amazing work in terms of breaking down the walls of a classroom and getting students out to make their communities better places, which really does cultivate the development of important skills and dispositions that are vital for success in the future workforce, college, career, whatever their pathway may be. So I'd love to hear from each of you what you think the biggest challenges have been to get this off the ground and implemented and really working. What are some of those barriers you've run into and how have you overcome them? And then part B of my question is, what's your future look like? What do you see going forward for your school and for your program? And what are some ways you're thinking about growing and continuously improving the great work that you're already doing?
Great question.
So I'd love to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Michael Gong, the science teacher. I'll touch on it from a service learning perspective. So one of the biggest challenges, I think, at first was finding the time in the schedule and just to get the students out of the classroom and working with these different community partners. For me, at first, it was a struggle to figure out, who's going to cover and teach my other classes, coordinating transportation, logistics, lunches, if we were going to be out of the building during the lunch period. So really just that initial figuring out the logistics and actually making the time, setting aside the time for these service learning experiences was one of the biggest challenges, especially when that can kind of be a pain sometimes to coordinate all that. But then as the students start to do it and get more engaged with that, you really realize how worth it is to put in all that work ahead of time to make that opportunity for the students. So that's just, for me, that's been one of the challenges, and I think it actually wasn't as big of a challenge last year when we just had one grade, obviously, but then now adding that second grade, it has made it a little bit more difficult logistically, and then going forward, I think, it'll be even a bigger challenge, but that, going to your second question, one way I hope that we can kind of, plan and prepare for this as we add our third and fourth classes to the school is to kind of revamp our service learning model in a way that we really make time for that intentionally in the schedule, because right now there's not an intentional time set aside for students to perform service learning. So if they do go out on an expedition for physical science, they might be missing their English class or their math class, depending on their schedule and the time that we're able to get into Thomas Jefferson or whatever other community partner. So one thing I am actually currently working on, and I think I would really like to see us do in the future, is coming up with a way to meet those needs for all the teachers, so that there's this intentional time set for service learning specifically, so that teachers are able to really prioritize that and make sure students are getting that full experience, but then also not missing out on what's going on in their other classes.
So the other challenge that I'll kind of hit on is, so we're building this network of community partners, and a lot of times we found community partners want to be involved in the school, but sometimes it's just, they said, well, what do you need from us? And so I would say one of the challenges is making sure you don't lose those community partners, and we've done a good job of creating a database and really kind of recording everyone that comes into contact with our school, and always making sure we're in some kind of communication with them. So it's the invites to the EOLs. It is just making sure invites to the Friends of meetings. So it's a challenge is that someone's coming to us wanting to help. We don't have an immediate need for them, but we know we will. So it's making sure we keep them active and involved and aware of what we're doing at our school. So just making sure someone is there to record and sharing that information with all the teachers. That way they know, like I met with somebody from the Cuyahoga Valley National Park recently based on like some mayor's sustainability summit we had. So making sure we've collected his contact information. I shared it with all of the teachers, not just our science teachers, because you never know when someone's anchor performance task or service learning opportunity is going to hit on something that that would be a right fit for. And then we'll make sure he's invited to our EOLs, and just always having that constant communication, so when we do need them, we have them at hand.
I want to tack on to what Brian said there about community partners. You know, one nice thing about doing the project that I shared out in the community is I met a lot of people while I was spending 30 hours in a chair at Ingenuity Fest in front of a pit of balls. I actually met the education person from the Cleveland Museum of Contemporary Art, who is now going to be bringing a project called Frequencies to our school in January, which is a collaboration with a Colombian artist, Oscar Murillo. Anyhow, it's a collaboration with an artist. But there is, like, I think he's absolutely right, that like cultivating those networks of community partners and keeping those contacts strong is really, really critical to the kind of work we're trying to do.
Great, thank you so much. It's so interesting. I love the work you guys are doing. We haven't had any other questions come in through the chat box, so I would like to end 1 minute early today by just saying thank you so very much to our presenters this evening. It was wonderful to learn more about the wonderful model you guys are implementing in Cleveland, and I had the great pleasure of visiting your school last year, and it's wonderful to hear the growth, and you guys are hitting it out of the park in terms of service learning and getting out there and getting your kids out in the community and meeting people and doing amazing projects. So a sincere thank you from us at iNACOL and our networks. It's so great for everyone to have the opportunity to learn from you. So if anybody else has any other questions, I'd be happy to connect you with our presenters this evening. It's part of what we do is to really facilitate and build these networks. So if you're a school leader interested in learning more about what they're doing in Cleveland, feel free to email us. We'll connect you and help create these powerful networks. So thank you so much for sharing. It's been wonderful. So I just added a couple upcoming webinars and events here on the slide in case you're interested in attending a future webinar or our 2018 symposium. And then I also just briefly highlighted some iNACOL resources that we've published recently there at the bottom, which you can all find on our website. So again, tonight's webinar was recorded, so we'll send you all a link so you can refer back to this wonderful information at any time you want to in the future. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a very wonderful holiday season.